Three gleaming Rolls-Royces sit parked outside a rundown Detroit garage at dawn, their pristine chrome reflecting the morning sun. But just 24 hours earlier, Ralph Johnson was counting his last $20 bill, wondering how he'd keep his shop open another week. Little did Ralph know that helping one broken-down car would change everything. The old fluorescent lights flicker to life as Ralph Johnson pushes open the heavy garage doors, their rusty hinges groaning in protest. At 52, his weathered hands tell the story of 30 years under car hoods, and his back aches from sleeping on the office couch again last night. He couldn't afford to heat his apartment this month. Ralph walks past his tool bench, running his fingers along the worn handles of wrenches that belonged to his father. On the wall, a dusty calendar shows 3 months of overdue bills: electricity, rent, insurance. The red final notice stamps blur together like angry wounds on white paper. Another day, another prayer, Ralph mutters, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that's seen better decades. The morning sun filters through grimy windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Ralph's garage sits in Detroit's forgotten corner, where abandoned lots outnumber working businesses 3-1. But this place is his sanctuary, his father's legacy, and he'll fight to keep it alive even if it kills him. The sound of a sputtering engine cuts through the morning quiet. Ralph looks up to see something that doesn't belong in his neighborhood: a sleek black luxury sedan limping into his lot, smoke trailing from under its hood. The car's pristine paint job gleams despite the mechanical distress, and Ralph can tell from the purr beneath the trouble that this machine cost more than he makes in 2 years. The driver's door opens, and out steps Marcus Lawrence, a tall black man in an expensive charcoal suit that probably costs more than Ralph's monthly rent. But something's wrong with this picture. Marcus's eyes dart nervously left and right, scanning the empty street like he's expecting trouble. His perfectly styled appearance can't hide the tension radiating from every muscle. "Excuse me," Marcus calls out, his voice carrying the polished tone of corporate boardrooms. "Are you open? I need help." Ralph wipes his hands on his coveralls and approaches the smoking vehicle. "What seems to be the problem?" "The engine just started making these terrible noises about 5 miles back," Marcus explains, but his attention keeps drifting to the street behind him. "I was hoping you could take a look." Ralph pops the hood and immediately spots the issue: a blown head gasket, coolant mixing with oil, an expensive mess. "This is gonna need some serious work," he says. "Probably looking at $800, maybe $1,000 in parts alone." Marcus's shoulders sag. "How long would it take?" 2, maybe 3 days if I can get the parts." Ralph studies the man's face, noting the worry lines that don't match his age. "You seem pretty anxious about the timeline." I need to be somewhere," Marcus says, glancing over his shoulder again. That's when Ralph notices the briefcase on the back seat: expensive leather, locked tight, positioned like Marcus never lets it out of his sight. But what happened next shocked everyone. Instead of asking for a deposit or running Marcus's credit card, Ralph does something that would change both their lives forever. "Look, I can see you're in some kind of trouble," Ralph says quietly. "I don't know what it is, and maybe I don't need to know. But I'll fix your car, and we can talk about payment later." Marcus stares at him in disbelief. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Ralph replies. "I know what it looks like when a man's running from something, and I know what it looks like when someone needs help. This decision would change everything." For the first time since arriving, Marcus's rigid posture relaxes slightly. His hand moves instinctively toward the briefcase, then stops. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Ralph shrugs, already reaching for his tools. "My daddy always said the measure of a man isn't what he can afford to give, but what he's willing to sacrifice for others. Besides, looks like we're both fighting our own battles." Marcus watches as Ralph begins disconnecting hoses and checking fluid levels with the practiced efficiency of someone who's seen every automotive problem twice. There's something in the mechanic's gentle competence that makes Marcus's constant vigilance waver. "I'm Marcus, by the way. Marcus Lawrence. Ralph Johnson. This is my shop, or what's left of it." As Ralph works, Marcus notices the stack of bills on the workbench, the patches in Ralph's coveralls, the way this man who has so little is willing to risk even more for someone he just met. But the real shock was still coming. A police siren wails in the distance, and Marcus freezes, his hand moving protectively toward the briefcase. Ralph looks up from the engine, seeing the fear return to Marcus's eyes like a curtain falling. "Friend of yours?" Ralph asks calmly. Marcus shakes his head, watching as the siren fades toward downtown. "I hope not." The morning sun cast long shadows across Ralph's garage as Marcus paced nervously near the luxury sedan, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete floor. Ralph wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag and studied the man's anxious expression. "Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do here," Marcus finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you don't understand the situation I'm in." Ralph set down his wrench and leaned against the workbench. "Then help me understand. What's got you so spooked?" Marcus glanced toward the garage entrance, then back at Ralph. "I used to work for Meridian Industries. You might have heard of them on the news lately." He paused, watching for recognition in Ralph's eyes. "I was their head of compliance until I discovered something that could destroy lives." "What kind of something?" Ralph asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. "Financial fraud. Millions of dollars stolen from employee pension funds. When I tried to report it internally, they threatened my family." Marcus's hands trembled slightly. "I took copies of the evidence and ran. Now they've got private investigators hunting me down." Just then, Emily Martinez walked through the side door, her work coveralls crisp and her tool belt jingling. She'd been Ralph's only employee for 3 years, and he trusted her completely. A single mother in her early 30s, Emily had learned everything she knew about engines from Ralph himself. "Morning, boss," she called out, then noticed Marcus. "Oh, sorry. Didn't know we had a customer this early." Ralph looked between Emily and Marcus, weighing his words carefully. "Emily, this is Marcus. His car broke down and needs some work." But you could almost see the secret burning in Ralph's conscience, the weight of what he'd just learned pressing down on his shoulders. How do you protect someone when you don't even know who's hunting them? Emily nodded politely and moved to her workstation, but Ralph caught her studying Marcus from the corner of her eye. She had good instincts about people, and something was clearly off about this whole situation. The distant wail of police sirens made Marcus freeze completely. His face went pale as the sound grew louder, then gradually faded as the patrol cars continued past the garage. "They're not coming for you," Ralph said gently. "That's just the morning shift change at the precinct down the street." But Marcus wasn't convinced. He kept checking his watch, glancing at the windows, drumming his fingers against his leg. Ralph had seen combat veterans with that same haunted look. Around noon, Emily stepped outside to take her lunch break and call her 8-year-old daughter. Through the window, Ralph watched her face light up as she talked to the little girl about her school day. Emily worked 60-hour weeks to keep food on their table and had never once complained about the overtime. That's when everything changed. Emily came rushing back inside, her face flushed with excitement and confusion. "Ralph, you need to see this." She held up a manila envelope that had been wedged between the car seats. "This fell out when I was checking the interior for personal items." Marcus lunged forward. "That's private property." "The envelope was already open," Emily said, backing toward Ralph. "I barely glanced at it, but Marcus, these documents have your name all over them. And there are bank statements showing transfers of $200 million, Marcus finished quietly. "That's how much they stole from the pension fund." Ralph felt his stomach drop. This wasn't just about corporate fraud anymore. This was about hundreds of families who'd lost their retirement savings, their security, their futures. And now he was harboring the one person who could prove it all. "You have the evidence to stop them," Ralph said, realization dawning in his voice. "Evidence that could get us all killed," Marcus replied. "These people don't just fire employees who cross them. They make them disappear." Emily looked between the two men, pieces clicking together in her mind. The expensive car, the nervous energy, the mysterious documents. "Ralph, what have you gotten yourself into?" Before either man could answer, the growl of multiple engines echoed from the street outside. Ralph peered through the blinds and felt his blood turn cold. 3 black SUVs had pulled up across from his garage, their tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun like dead eyes. Marcus saw Ralph's expression and didn't need to look outside himself. "They found me." The investigators arrived in Detroit like vultures circling prey. Ralph watched through his grimy garage window as 2 men in dark suits questioned Mrs. Henderson at the corner store, their voices carrying across the quiet morning air. His hands tightened around the wrench he'd been holding since Marcus told him the truth. "They're getting closer," Marcus whispered from behind the workbench where he'd been hiding for the past hour. "I should go. I've put you in enough danger already." Ralph turned to face the man who'd stumbled into his life just days ago. Marcus's expensive suit was wrinkled now, his perfectly styled hair disheveled, but his eyes held a determination that Ralph recognized. It was the same look he saw in his own mirror every morning when he promised himself he wouldn't give up on the garage. "Nobody's going anywhere," Ralph said firmly. "Come on." He led Marcus through the back door and up the narrow wooden stairs to the cramped apartment above the shop. The space had been empty since his nephew moved out 6 months ago, leaving behind nothing but dust and memories. Ralph pulled back the heavy curtains, revealing a small room with a cot and a table. "It's not much, but it's safe," Ralph said. "They won't think to look up here." Marcus sat heavily on the cot, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. "Ralph, you don't understand what you're risking. Whitmore Industries has resources, connections. They've destroyed people for less than what I took from them." Ralph pulled up the single chair and sat facing Marcus. For the first time since this began, he really looked at the man he was helping. Behind the expensive clothes and polished exterior, he saw something familiar, the weight of choosing between survival and doing what's right. "Tell me about it," Ralph said quietly. "All of it." Marcus's voice shook as he spoke. The environmental reports they buried. The cancer clusters near their chemical plants. Families losing everything while executives bought third homes. His hands trembled. "I had copies of everything, internal memos, payoff receipts, medical records they tried to suppress. But taking those documents made me a target." Downstairs, the garage door chimed. Ralph's blood ran cold as unfamiliar voices echoed through the space below. Emily's cheerful greeting was met with curt, professional tones. "We're looking for information about a customer," one of the investigators said. "Expensive car, might have come in for repairs recently." Ralph held his breath, listening to Emily's response. "Sir, we get all kinds of cars here. Mr. Johnson helps anyone who needs it, rich or poor." But then Ralph heard something that made his heart sink, the investigator's voice getting closer to the stairs. "Mind if we take a look around? Just routine." Marcus started to stand, ready to surrender himself, but Ralph grabbed his arm. In that moment, something shifted between them. Marcus saw the same stubborn determination in Ralph's eyes that had driven him to steal those documents in the first place. Ralph saw in Marcus the courage it took to sacrifice everything for people he'd never meet. "My nephew's room," Ralph whispered. "They have no right to search without a warrant." Downstairs, Emily's voice grew firmer. "Actually, gentlemen, I do mind. This is private property, and unless you have official paperwork, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Ralph smiled despite the danger. Emily had been watching, learning, growing stronger under his guidance. Now she was protecting him the same way he'd always protected her. The investigators left, but not before Ralph heard one of them say, "We'll be back. With paperwork next time." As their footsteps faded, Marcus helped Ralph fix Mrs. Chen's transmission, his hands surprisingly skilled with the tools. As they worked side by side, sharing stories of their childhoods, Ralph's in Detroit's declining neighborhoods, Marcus's in suburban privilege that couldn't fill an empty heart, something unexpected happened. They became friends. "You know," Marcus said, tightening a bolt with practiced precision, I never thought I'd find peace working on cars." Ralph chuckled. "Funny thing about fixing what's broken, sometimes it fixes you too." But their moment of peace shattered when Emily burst through the back door, her face pale with fear. "Ralph, they were at my daughter's school. Asking questions about me, about you. They know something." Just then, the local news flickered on the small television Ralph kept in the corner. The anchor's voice filled the garage. "Breaking news in the Whitmore Industries scandal. New documents suggest the cover-up goes deeper than initially reported, with multiple government officials now under investigation." Marcus's face went white. "It's starting. The story's breaking without me." Ralph looked between Marcus and Emily, seeing the fear in both their faces, and made a decision that would change everything. But before he could speak, his old rotary phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the tension like a knife. The caller ID showed nothing but a blocked number, and when Ralph answered, the voice on the other end spoke just 4 words that made his blood freeze. "We know he's there." The news anchor's voice echoed through Ralph's small apartment above the garage as he stared at the television screen in disbelief. "Tonight at 11, breaking developments in the Meridian Industries scandal as more whistleblowers come forward with evidence of widespread corruption." Ralph's hands trembled as he reached for his phone. Marcus was downstairs, probably still awake, unaware that his story had just exploded across every major news network. The corporate scandal he'd risked everything to expose was finally seeing the light of day, but that also meant the danger had multiplied tenfold. "Marcus," Ralph called softly as he descended the creaky stairs to the garage. "We need to talk." Marcus looked up from the engine he'd been quietly tinkering with, his face pale in the fluorescent light. "I heard the news," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're talking about Meridian on every channel." Ralph pulled up a folding chair and sat across from him. "This changes everything. Those investigators aren't just going to give up now. If anything, they'll be more desperate to find you." The weight of the situation settled between them like a heavy blanket. Marcus set down his wrench and looked directly at Ralph. "You've done more than enough for me. I can't let you and Emily get hurt because of my problems." But Ralph had already made his decision. "Tomorrow night, I'm driving you out of town myself. We'll make it look like you're just another customer picking up a car. I've got that old pickup truck in the back lot, nobody would suspect anything." "Ralph, you don't understand what you're risking." "I understand plenty," Ralph interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "I understand what it means to do the right thing, even when it's hard." The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Emily arrived early, as she always did, but her usual cheerful demeanor was replaced by obvious concern. She'd been asking subtle questions about Marcus for days, and Ralph could see the worry etched in her face. "We need to talk," Emily said, closing the garage door behind her. "Those men were back yesterday evening, asking more questions. They're getting suspicious, Ralph." Before Ralph could respond, the sound of expensive car engines filled the street outside. Through the window, they watched as 2 black sedans parked directly across from the garage. The investigators had returned, and this time they weren't being subtle about their surveillance. "They're watching us," Marcus said, appearing from the back room where he'd been staying out of sight. "This was a mistake. I should never have involved you both in this." Emily stepped forward, surprising both men with her resolve. "No, Marcus. What was a mistake was thinking we'd let you face this alone." She turned to Ralph. "Whatever plan you've got, count me in." Ralph felt a surge of pride for his young employee, but also a deep fear for her safety. "Emily, this isn't your fight." "It became my fight the moment you decided to help him," she said firmly. "You saved my life when you gave me this job, Ralph. You think I'm going to abandon you now?" The tension in the garage was suffocating as they watched the investigators through the window. One of them was making a phone call, gesturing toward the building. Time was running out. That's when Ralph's phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, and for a moment, Ralph hesitated. But something told him the answer. "Ralph Johnson?" The voice on the other end was authoritative but not threatening. "Yes, this is Ralph. Mr. Johnson, my name is David Chen. I'm the interim CEO of Meridian Industries. I believe you've been helping one of our former employees, Marcus Lawrence. Ralph's heart stopped. Emily and Marcus were watching him intently, seeing the shock register on his face. Mr. Johnson, are you there? I'm here, Ralph managed to say. Good. I need you to listen very carefully. Those men watching your garage, they don't work for us. They work for the people Marcus exposed, and they're very dangerous. But help is on the way. Ralph looked out the window again. The investigators were getting out of their cars, walking purposefully toward the garage. His phone buzzed with another incoming call, this one showing a number he didn't recognize, but somehow felt important. Ralph, Chen's voice continued, whatever happens in the next few minutes, trust that someone has been watching out for all of you. Your courage hasn't gone unnoticed. The line went dead just as the investigators reached the garage door. The phone in Ralph's hand trembles as the voice on the other end introduces himself as Jonathan Hartwell, CEO of Meridian Industries. Mr. Johnson, I've been following your situation very closely. What you've done for Marcus Lawrence hasn't gone unnoticed. Ralph's heart pounds as he glances at Marcus, who's watching with wide eyes from across the garage. Emily stands frozen by the workbench, still processing everything that's happened. The weight of the past few days crashes over Ralph like a wave, the fear, the uncertainty, the choice to help a stranger despite the risks. Sir, I don't understand, Ralph manages, his voice barely above a whisper. I just did what anyone should do. Hartwell's voice carries a warmth that surprises Ralph. Mr. Johnson, thanks to Marcus's courage in exposing the corruption in our subsidiary company, we've been able to clean house completely. 12 executives have been arrested, and we've recovered over $50 million in stolen funds. But more importantly, we've learned about your extraordinary character through this ordeal. Marcus steps forward, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Ralph, I never told you the full truth, he says, his voice thick with emotion. When I exposed that scandal, I wasn't just some random whistleblower. I was the VP of Finance, and I had everything to lose. But I couldn't watch them steal from pension funds anymore. I thought my life was over. Emily gasps, finally understanding the magnitude of what they've been part of. You gave up everything, she whispers. And Ralph never asked for a single thing in return, Marcus continues, turning to face his unlikely savior. When I was terrified and broken down on that street, you didn't see a corporate executive who could benefit you. You saw a human being who needed help. The CEO's voice crackles through the phone again. Mr. Johnson, we want to show our gratitude in a way that honors both your character and your profession. Look outside your garage. Ralph's legs feel like jelly as he walks toward the large bay doors, Emily and Marcus flanking him on either side. As he rolls up the metal door, the early morning Detroit sun streams in, illuminating a sight that takes his breath away. 3 pristine Rolls-Royce vehicles sit parked in perfect formation outside his humble garage. Not just any Rolls-Royces, a gleaming silver Phantom, a deep burgundy Cullinan, and a midnight black Ghost, each one worth more than Ralph's entire shop. This can't be real, Emily breathes, her hand flying to her mouth. A well-dressed woman emerges from behind the Phantom, holding an envelope and keys. Mr. Johnson? I'm Sarah Chen from Meridian Industries. These vehicles represent more than just cars, they represent the values you've shown. Integrity, courage, and selfless service. The silver Phantom is for your personal use. The Cullinan is for your business, think of the clients you can now serve. And the Ghost? That's for Emily, in recognition of her loyalty and bravery. Tears stream down Emily's face as she realizes what this means, not just for Ralph, but for her and her daughter's future. Ralph, I can't accept this, she stammers. Yes, you can, Ralph says firmly, his own eyes wet with tears. You risked everything to protect Marcus and me. You deserve this and so much more. Marcus pulls out a handwritten letter from his jacket pocket, his hands shaking as he hands it to Ralph. I'm entering witness protection tomorrow, but I needed you to have this. It's a promise that I'll never forget what you've taught me about real character. you didn't just save my life, you showed me what it means to be truly wealthy." As Ralph reads the heartfelt words, neighbors begin emerging from their homes, drawn by the unusual sight of luxury cars in their modest neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson from next door walks over, a knowing smile on her weathered face. "Ralph Johnson," she calls out, "I always knew your kindness would come back to you tenfold. This whole neighborhood is better because of who you are." The crowd that gathers isn't envious or resentful, they're genuinely happy for Ralph. Children point excitedly at the cars while parents nod approvingly, understanding that good things have finally happened to someone who truly deserves them. As Marcus prepares to leave with the federal agents who've arrived to escort him to his new life, he embraces Ralph one final time. "Promise me something," he says. "Never stop being who you are. The world needs more Ralph Johnsons." Standing there surrounded by his transformed life, Ralph realizes the most profound truth of all: he's not a different person because of these gifts. He's the same man who opened his garage doors to a stranger in need, who risked everything for what was right, who saw humanity before profit. The cars aren't changing who he is, they're simply the universe's way of reflecting back the goodness he's always carried. As the sun rises fully over Detroit, Ralph Johnson looks at Emily, at his neighbors, at his garage that will now serve an even greater purpose in the community, and he smiles. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest transformations of all. What would you have done in Ralph's position? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of ordinary heroes doing extraordinary things.